All right, I see we are recording. Excellent. Thank you so much. Um, Welcome everybody to this workshop, Changemakers session. I just want to go ahead and give a thank you to Carrie, to Karen, and the team who've been supporting this. And hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. Excellent. And so, folks, we're really appreciative of your time. I'm going to share a little bit more about myself, but my name is Gekukura Jamini. I'm very excited to bring this topic to you. It's called Generative Artificial Intelligence is a people story, not a technology story. And this is part of some work I've been doing called September. I'm a doctoral student here at the University of the Pacific, and one of the things I've been exploring is how technology can help people and empower people. And September was one of my class projects. It stands for Supporting Empowered Teams to Harness Their Expertise for Mission Benefit and Advancement. It's kind of a mouthful, but so we're going to stick with September, okay, for the duration of the day. And so just to give you an overview of what the session is going to be, we're going to start off with looking at understanding some generative AI basics. I think that's critical for what we're going to be looking at. I'm not going to go too deeply into that from a technical standpoint, but I will try to get us a shared amount of knowledge. And then we'll go ahead and look at some AI, demystify AI, whether we have some myths and benefits. And then we'll also do some hands-on demonstration. I'll introduce you to Dare, something I came up with for this presentation, and hopefully it helps you. And then finally, I'll have a closing challenge for you because I believe the power of the session is really about what you do after this, not just what we share today. And so that is the overview for our session. So I would love to know what brings you in today. And I just have to be very, not transparent, but vulnerable here. I am using a new technology setup, so just work with me as I go through that. You might get to see some wonderful pictures of my family. We're gonna just roll with it. But I would love to hear in the chat what brings you to here today, and what made this topic stand out for you. And I'm gonna go ahead and open that up. Right there, perfect. And thank you so much, Carrie, for dropping in the link to the resource folder in the community resource there. So as we get some chats in, and hopefully folks are able to just drop in their chats, wonderful. There's a resource folder there that includes the slides for today, and it also has a resource which is a Padlet. And the Padlet is really an opportunity for us to be in community. So this is a workshop, right? Meaning that we get to share information with each other. And so what I would hope is that folks can go onto the Padlet and drop in a few nuggets of how they're using generative artificial intelligence in their work. And I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at the chat now to celebrate some folks. I'm a doctoral student, and my dissertation focus is also AI. Wow, that's so cool, Alyssa. We have to talk. I want to learn it all. Yes, me too. That's honestly what inspired me here. Here for you. Thank you. I want to give a special shout out to my cohort mates that are here. I'm not going to go through everyone, but I just want to say thank you to Los Ocho. You all, thank you for forcing me into this. I love your topic and learning more about it. I'm interested in learning more about AI. How can we maximize the use of opportunities and safely infusing AI with people? That's why we're here. For a long time, AI has been part of my interest. But for more, I was invited. Yes, same as Teresa. So thank you so much. I hope that something from today's session will be of benefit to you and the work that you're doing. And I think I almost am positive I might be able to, impart on you one nugget of information that helps you on your journey. So my name again is Gekukula Zemini. I am many things. I have many roles. One of those is an education administrator for the state. I also am a doctoral student. I am part of Los Ocho, which is the cohort 8 at the University of the Pacific. Los Ocho forever. I'm also, according to the Strength Finder test, I'm a futurist. And I'm also an unwavering optimist. And so I like to take the positive view on things. And that's why, to me, this conversation about generative AI is going to lean into what is possible rather than what is not possible or what's scary about it. I want you to know I'm not a technical expert by any means. I am like yourselves, just someone who's on a journey and have discovered something that may be helpful. And so I want to share that with people and engage in these conversations so that we can kind of take down any barriers folks have to the technology that is available to us. And so that is part of my story. But another part of my story that I want to share with you all is this visual kind of explains a path that I was on, right? And I had to find better ways. And the impetus for me finding better ways to do the things I was doing in my everyday life was that from time to time, I was just experiencing this extraordinary burnout, right? And I just couldn't do one more thing. And so I really took it upon myself at that moment to say, how can we find better ways to do things? And that's what's driven me down this path. And so like for me, when I experiment with this technology, it's now such a win when I can find even the most marginal improvement in the things that I'm doing every day. And so that's what I hope for us all. If we can find even the most marginal improvement in some of the ways we go about things, then that will be a win. And I hope you take that with you. It does not have to be monumental. And so my session goal for us today, and we're going to move a little bit quickly, but feel free to drop any questions in the chat, is that I want you to be more informed, empowered, and interested in experimenting with AI. Those are my three things for you today: to be more informed, empowered, and interested in experimenting with AI. And so why are we here? We're here because generative AI, in my view, and also from some of the folks that I've been listening to a lot, believe that AI is a people story. It's all about how it can empower people. The technology itself, yes, is fascinating. It's incredible. It's a technological investment like we've never seen before. But ultimately, the technology is only as good as the people that it serves and that are empowered by it. And so that is why I believe we're here today, to focus in on how it can help people. So why should we even pay attention to this, right? So in the news, you've heard about all the probably the bad examples. One of my favorites is the lawyer who used a brief that didn't exist, of course. We've also heard about how it can, be used for misinformation and all these things. And so there's a lot of that information, but what I wanted us to pay attention to here is about how it impacts people. And so by the numbers, and as a result of AI, 30% of work hours could be automated by 2030 because of this technology, generative artificial intelligence. All right, that's from McKinsey and Co. According to Brookings, 30% of all workers could see 50% of jobs disrupted by AI, generative AI, the most recent forms of it. Also, 38% of workers in the US are worried about their jobs, according to a survey conducted by the American Psychological Association. And 6 in 10 current workers will require additional training in the next 4 years to become proficient with this technology so as not to be displaced. And so these are just some of the stats. Please note that many of these are just hypotheses right now. We're not sure how it's going to play out. But one of the things that I'm most sure about and what drives me is that it will have an impact on people. And the best way to help people is to provide them with education and to make them acclimated with the technology, right? To make sure that they feel confident in how they use it or being able to articulate how it's used. So understanding the generative AI basics, right? And just so you know, all of the images from this presentation today, with the exception of the ones of me and my classmates, were generated by AI. So that is going to be either a really good thing, and maybe later on you'll spot something that is a not so good thing, but it's part of the process. And so, how did this all begin? Just going back to the basics. In 2017, and you don't need to read the paper, but it's good to know what changed. In 2017, some scientists at Google published a landmark paper called "Attention is All You Need," and really set the foundation for all these generative pre-trained transformers, these GPTs, which have become so popular. And on the next slide, you'll hear about some of the most popular ones. But what they were able to establish is that if you were able to train essentially an algorithm to take in natural language and to process that based on how the data that it's trained on, it could produce something. And so if you input in a natural language query or prompt, it can calculate a response and provide that to you in whatever form you like. And so some of the ways we're seeing that right now is images. We're also seeing videos. We're seeing, obviously, text has been available for a couple of years now. But one of the fascinating ones is video. If you haven't tried it, Sora, you can go in there, enter a prompt, and all of a sudden you'll have yourself a video. I actually tried to do one of a tiger landing at the University of the Pacific. It did not meet quality spec, and so I moved on from that, okay? But if you're ever interested, and in that resource document, if you go check it out, there is a link to the article, so that you can, if you're very interested in how this all began. And so what do we mean by generative artificial intelligence? And so you don't have to hear my voice the whole time. I'm going to pivot over right now and stop the screen share to a video on YouTube, and I have it up already and ready to go. And so we're going to go ahead and share this screen. And then, all right.
Okay, enough fluffy metaphors. Let's clarify some terms. AI, as you probably know, stands for artificial intelligence. AI is not new. Fields like machine learning and computer vision have been around for decades. Whenever you see a YouTube recommendation or a web search result, or whenever you get a credit card transaction approved, that's traditional AI in action. Generative AI is AI that generates new original content, rather than just finding or classifying existing content. That's the G in GPT, for example. Large language models, or LLMs, are a type of generative AI that can communicate using normal human language. ChatGPT is a product by the company OpenAI. It started as an LLM, essentially an advanced chatbot, using a new architecture called the transformer architecture, which, by the way, is the T in GPT. It is so fluent at human language that anyone can use it. You don't need to be an AI expert or programmer. And that's kind of what triggered the whole revolution. So how does it actually work? Well, a large language model is an artificial neural network, basically a bunch of numbers or parameters connected to each other, similar to how our brain is a bunch of neurons or brain cells connected to each other. Neural networks only deal with numbers. You send in numbers, and depending on how the parameters are set, other numbers come out. But any kind of content, such as text or images, can be represented as numbers. So let's say I write dogs are. When I send that to a large language model, that gets converted to numbers, processed by the neural network, and then the resulting numbers are converted back into text. In this case, the word animals. Dogs are animals. So yeah, this is basically a guess the next word machine. The interesting part is if we take that output and combine it with the input and send it through the model again, then it will continue adding new words. That's what's going on behind the scenes when you type something in ChatGPT. In this case, for example, it generated a whole story. And I can continue this indefinitely by adding more prompts. A large language model may have.
And for our purposes, we're going to stop it right there. But I think I did include the video link to this video. You can find it on YouTube. It's excellent. And it keeps going for 17 minutes. And I think it's worth the watch if you just want to understand how all of this technology is working right now. But I think for our purposes, that really does set the stage for the discussion we're going to have today. And so I'm just going to pivot back to my slides. Excellent. And then share the screen right here. Again, thank you so much for humoring and engaging. And so some of the most common examples you'll see of chatbots or the manifestations of generative AI are these chatbots, right? And that's OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Perplexity, Google Gemini, and Copilot. And so just by a reaction, show of hands, I know some folks are off video, who has worked with or is familiar with any of these? I see a couple hands going up, and I see thumbs ups, I see some claps, I see some thing. Okay, so at a minimum, I think we've all heard a little bit about it. Okay, that's a pretty good number of folks who have played or worked with one of these. And so these are just some examples. There's tons more. Literally, there's one probably every day. These are just the ones that are most popular. Oh, and just going back. So let's go ahead and discuss some myths around generative AI. So one of the myths that we have is that generative AI is truly intelligent. Well, it is not. I know there's a lot of people in the Bay Area working on this question, and they've been working on it a little while. But artificial intelligence is just that. It's artificial. It's a complex set of algorithms that are, as the gentleman mentioned in the video, really good at guessing based on the data set that they are provided. But they get very, very good at that. And so they can emulate or seem as if they are performing human thinking, but it is really a calculation taking place. And so generative AI will replace human creativity. I don't see that. And if you look at the sources from Forbes and Wharton, that's just not the case, right? So they may take our input and emulate that, but human creativity is so much more than that. It is emotion and things that really can't even be transcribed into data. And so we need to keep that in mind. I think it'll actually support human creativity, and I'll share some examples of how that's working for me. And also, generative AI is a completely new phenomenon. I was so surprised to find out that like artificial intelligence, the term was coined in like 1960 or something. It's like a really old term. And so people have been working on this for a very, very long time, like coming out of the Second World War, kind of working on this. So it's not new phenomenon. It's just this iteration rather of generative AI is new. Generative AI will replace humans entirely. That's just not possible at this point. At present, the technology excels at automating tasks, but it cannot replace a human in let's say, a job, for example. But it's really important that we do pay attention to some of the risks that exist with AI. And so we want to mitigate those as best as possible. And so one of the most significant risks with generative AI is around the environment. So I put that kind of off to the side. The environmental concerns are pretty significant. I think it's worth noting that when OpenAI trained ChatGPT-3, they used up the same amount of power as 130 households in the United States of America, right? And so that was a lot of power. And I mean, that was in the space of, I think it was a month or so, or probably more than that, but it was a lot of power. And so when you think about that, GPT-4, we're on 4.0 now, used 50 times that amount of power in order to create ChatGPT that we use today. And so keeping those things in mind, they do use a little bit more power, but there's also some other things that we want to pay attention to with regard to risk. And that is, it may reflect the biases that exist within its training data. So we don't have a lot of transparency from some of the major providers about what kind of data goes in, but the biases within that data may be manifested. So as you know, the internet has a lot of data. If you just took everything on the internet, it would manifest human bias, whatever that is, where it's pulling from. So that may show up in the training data and show up in the responses. It may also generate incorrect outputs, also known as hallucinations. These things are possible. I think they've been pretty popular. They've become less significant or less prominent on the news, I would say, than they have been probably in the past when this all started. But they still can happen. And so that's something to be aware of. Data and privacy issues exist. And so in most cases, like our enterprises, it's not best to put in private or personal data into these things. Perhaps those applications will come in the future that are just focused on that. There's also intellectual property concerns. So if you follow like the New York Times, they've sued a lot of providers of these technologies because they suspect that their information, articles and that were used in the training of these technologies. And so those are the risks. You want to pay attention to those. There's actually a really good, that article by IBM goes into a couple more, but I wanted to elevate these because they, across my research and what I've seen, these are the ones that come to mind first and foremost. So this brings me to my first principle. And today I'm going to share 3 principles that I hope you keep in mind as you proceed with your own inquiry into this technology. And so the principle number 1 is a human in the loop. You need to have a human in the loop when you use this technology. It is not such that it can operate on its own. It requires a human to be there. And at this point in stage, having a human in the loop is definitely best practice. And so you'll see a lot about that. The state of California actually is huge on that. And that anytime we're using this technology or even experimenting, there needs to be a human in the loop, someone involved. And that what that means is a human is core to the process and is core to the decision making. And so we're not replacing people, we are therefore empowering people. And so circling back to why we are here, generative AI is a people story because it can empower people. I really want to get that through today. It's meant to empower people, whether that's coders, whether that's us who are, or potential students who are joining us here today. I see some of our professors. It's meant to empower people. And why is that? Principle 2 that I want to share with you is human input is the first step. And what I mean by that is you can't, this technology, if I went to ChatGPT right now and opened it up, it couldn't do anything without me. I have to give it the first input. I have to provide the first thought. And so just know that right now, as it stands, this technology does not work without a human. And so our input that we put in, whether good or bad, is the first step. And so some of those risks you see to misinformation, it really starts with us, right? So what we input into it and do. But there's a lot of possibility here. There is a lot of possibility with what we can do with the technology. And Carrie, may I ask, I cannot see the chat, so if anything comes up, feel free to just let me know, okay? Actually, I just pulled it up here. That's my biggest detriment of exploring it. Carrie, great, as long as you unplug from the wall and cut off the electricity, you're in control. I love that. Sometimes you got to do that, no lie. Sometimes you have to do that. I know that there's obviously privacy concerns in that. So that's one of the things you'll want to be judicious about is how you use it and when you use it. Today, I'll provide you with some use cases that I believe are, or should I say, I'm comfortable with, but you have to proceed as you are comfortable with. And so today, for this session, I wanted to introduce this framework called DARE. With a simple or complex prompt, you can DARE, and that stands for Develop, Augment, and Research or Enhance. And so today, I'm going to be giving some demonstrations of how we might use this technology in these spaces to develop things or create, to augment, to research, or to enhance, just as a starter. But I also want to note that if you want to go to the Padlet, there might be more ideas there that can help you with this. And so the first one is develop. Real use case number one, and this is just some I'm sharing with you. You can use it to develop, brainstorm, or generate content. And so I'm going to pivot over, and obviously, folks, I watched someone do this yesterday. I actually went to an AI conference yesterday, so I'm juiced. I'm ready to go, hyped on this topic. But as you know, with demonstrations, hopefully all goes according to plan, but I ask that you bear with me. So I'm going to transition over right now and stop the screen share, and I'm actually going to head to ChatGPT. And you know what I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask it for help. And let's go ahead and open this one. All right, and perfect. So what we're going to do today with regard to develop, and maybe when I go back to the slides, I won't go full screen, but I'm going to ask ChatGPT support with developing a plan for this presentation. So I have my description. I'm going to copy that over here. Can everyone see my Chrome? Okay, excellent. Going to edit manual. So we're in ChatGPT right now, and we're gonna. This is just one example of one of the systems you can use. I use ChatGPT. You could use Claude. You could use whatever you want. But let's go ahead and ask for its help with coming up with a plan for this presentation. So I'm going to say, I am, and as you all know, typing while being watched is the most difficult enterprise. I'm a doctoral student presenting on generative. I'm going to say GenAI, it'll figure it out. Below is my description. Help me come up with a plan for the presentation. It is 60 minutes and will include some demonstration. And so I actually included some best practices with prompting. I'm not sure I'm following them right now. Oh, that's the wrong one. Hang on one sec. But the better you prompt, the better results you get. And so just drop that into there. And that's just my description from today. So I'm going to go ahead and click generate and see what happens. So we're going to find out together if this works. Okay, so hopefully you see that it's generating right now. It's come up with the introduction, that's 5 minutes, understanding generative AI basics. Let's keep going. Okay, let's see where we're at. Demonstration, 15 minutes, we're right on time. Real world examples, stories. And so you'll note that it's helped me come up with a plan. And what I love about this is that I'm not attached to this plan. I don't own the plan. I mean, I own it, but I'm not required to use it. So I can just take what I want and leverage it. So let's process this. Real world examples, empowering stories. I will definitely share some of my own. interactive Q&A and myth busting. Sure. And then closing and call to action. We will certainly have some of that. And so that's just one of the examples of how we can develop or use it to develop. And one of my favorite real life examples of how I've used the technology was I had to come up with a welcome script for a video in our office. And I have never written a script in my life, and nor do I know what to say. And so I came to it and I said, I'm working on a work welcome video for our team, and I'm putting together something. Can you help me come up with a script for that? And it did that. And so this is just one example of how you might use it in your work. And so I'm going to pivot back to the slides, and I'm not going to go full screen. Hopefully you all can see it okay. All good? Okay, cool. And I can make it slightly bigger. But just because we're going to need to keep going, that's the real use case number one, right? So develop, brainstorm, or generate content. So let's go to real use case number two, augment our capacity. And so augment our capacity, this one really comes and stems from how can it enhance the things we are doing or help us achieve more than we could just by ourselves. And so I think for this one, what I'm going to do is I am going to go into ChatGPT again. And just remember, please, you can use any of these. They're almost commoditized at this point. You could use whatever one you wanted. But yesterday I said I went to that conference, and so I was doing it, and I need to get back, get some notes to folks about what I saw and heard during the conference. And so I'm going to use a very simple example, but you could use data, you could use all Excel spreadsheets, you could use PowerPoints. We're going to go into that in a little bit, but I'm going to take my notes, and embarrassingly, I'm actually going to bring them on screen, and hopefully you all can see them because it's not great. All right. Can you see the Word doc? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate the thumbs ups and all that. That's really helpful. But folks, I just want you to look at what I typed yesterday, okay? If you're seeing it, there's a little bit of red, and this is part of the story. So I just typed whatever I could take down. I was typing as fast as I could, and you'll note that there's some notes. This is from a roundtable sit down with some folks. Just note what I want you to see is that it's kind of all over the place. The spelling is kind of crazy. I was trying to document as much as possible. And so that was my notes from the public sector work group yesterday. And hopefully this will let me get up. Perfect. Okay, you go away. And so we have that. And so now I'm going to go back into ChatGPT. I'm going to say, these are my notes from a conference I attended yesterday. Please help me clean these up and identify some themes. Okay, so augmenting our capacity. So key themes here. AI integration and challenges in government. I should mention the conference that I went to yesterday was regarding government, so implementation in the government, training and upskilling. I think that's going to be one of the biggest topics that we're going to have about training and upskilling our workforce to make sure that they are prepared. And also we see data and governance, utilization, workforce resilience and recruitment, promoting interactive and collaboration, ethical and cleaned up notes. So it also cleaned up the notes exactly as I said, and I'll keep going with that. But most importantly, the key themes are there. And think about this in the context of, if you go to a presentation, you go somewhere, you take down your notes. But for me, like I said, one of the difficulties I'd find is having the chance to go back and clean that up and make sure it's ready for presentation, make sure it's ready for my administrator or whoever I'm presenting to. And so in some cases, what I tend to do at work is I'll take a lot of notes. We have an enterprise resource that we use, which is Copilot. And I'll say, please help me come up with put together a one pager of what I just took down notes on. And so it'll help me do that. And so we'll see what it came up with. It actually cleaned up the notes pretty good. It's actually spot on. I did have some folks from IBM. We had Thousand Oaks. They shared a great thing, and I'll share what the person who was there shared with me. They said, when Excel comes up with a wrong formula, I don't blame Excel, right? So when generative AI comes up with something wrong, I can't blame the GenAI, right? It's just another platform, right? So we're going through that kind of technological shift. And so just keep that in mind. And so that's an example of it augmenting our capacity. Another example I personally have seen is taking my own content and changing it into something else. So a lot of my colleagues are here, my cohort mates. We have to write pages and pages for our dissertation, but then we also have to create tables of timelines. We also have to come up with what's another example? Come up with forms for people to fill out to consent to research. We have to then come up with questionnaires and all that. And so this is a really great way to just kind of start the thinking process and expedite, right? We're talking about marginal improvement, expedite our own thinking. Just get me to a little further along in the process. And that's a win in my book, okay? And I see Alyssa's dropping some in the chat. Thank you so much. All right, and let's see. So the real use case number 3 is research, understand, and engage with topics. And there's many different ways to do this, and hopefully y'all can still see my screen. Just double checking. Cool. There's many ways to do this, but one of the ways I want to show you today, it's a little complex, but I think it'll be transformative in how it can help you do research, whether that's in your personal life, professional life. It just expedites the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in Notebook LM. This is a Google product. It provides you with the ability to gather a lot of documents. I already have a bunch of notebooks. We're going to create a new one. And so what it'll ask me to do is add some files, and then I will take a step back and kind of explain what it can help you with. Okay. And so we're going to go back to that folder, research. I have 6 articles. Between them, I'm pretty sure it's over 1,000 pages, just a heads up. So I don't really always have time to read 1,000 pages in a week, especially because I got to be writing. That's the job, 30 minutes of writing a day. And so what the reports I pulled up, because this is appropriate for my research, is around AI's role in workforce development. And so what you see here is on the left panel, you have all the documents that I just uploaded. And there's the chat side, which we're going to use in just a quick second. And then you can also come up with a study guide should you need it. But this is just one of the resources that allows you to expedite some research. And so obviously I am aware that these articles are in line with what I'm looking for, right? So I've gone through the internet, I found them, I've downloaded them. Some of them are reports from whether it's business or universities. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just type in simple question: how will AI impact the workforce? And if you wanted to ask a better research question, you could probably be more specific about that. But for the purposes of our conversation today, I'm just going to stop on that question. And so what it does, it's going to read through all of those articles all together, and it's going to provide me with what is the connections in between that, right? And so I'm going to scroll back up to the top. This is what's called a note. And it says general impacts on AI and the workforce. Actually, let me go to the top. Especially artificial intelligence, especially generative AI, is expected to have a significant impact on the workforce with potential for both positive and negative consequences. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, just making sure. And so we can then click into like number 1 and figure out what is the source of that information. I will just give you a tip: labeling is your friend. Making sure your files are labeled correctly is your friend. And so I now have learnings from all of these documents and the common threads. And what I will say is it is so important to verify. And so it says job transformation, and it says there's a bunch of sources here. So I'll click on one of them and I'll say number 7. Okay, take me there. I want to see exactly where it says that job transformation is a likely outcome of generative AI. Now, for our researchers out here, and I know there's someone on the line, this is a very cool tool that can help you, just understand a topic so much faster. So I think of when I first started my doctoral journey a whole 2 years ago, you would go through every single document trying to find that whether it's relevant or not. And now I find myself in a place where I'm like, okay, give me everything. I'll take a look at all of y'all and try to start understanding things. And then I'll dig deeper. So when I get this information, I go then dig deeper. But this is an academic example, but there are other examples. You could do this with vacations. You could do this with trips. I'm actually going to share. That's one of my favorite use cases is is pulling up information on places we're going and learning about that. And here's another cool function. I haven't quite used this yet because this is like, we're all on a growth journey, and this is part of my growth. You can come up with a podcast by clicking generate. And this will take a couple minutes. We're not going to run through the whole process, but it will come up with a podcast. And then you can listen through that. And I don't know how many minutes it is, but I know some colleagues have tried this. But folks, what's really, really cool about this is that when the chat is operating in this way, it is only using the data that you have provided. Okay? So it's not going into it's obviously going to reference some things in the internet. If you have an acronym it doesn't know, it can find that. But what it's doing is retrieving answers for you from your sources. Your sources. And so think about that. If I wanted to I work in multilingual programs. It's such a joy. But there's a lot of research that comes out. And so I can't always get to a 500-page document. But I can get in here, I can ask questions, I can interrogate, I can dig deeper and get more information about something. And then I can add another resource, and I can add another resource, and I can compare, and I can see how things have changed over time. And so you become a researcher really quickly, and you can expedite that process. We're talking marginal improvement in our process, right? And so I see a question there. I'm going to just pop into right there. Doesn't ChatGPT reject articles due to copyright concerns? Scott, I don't know. I haven't run into that issue personally, but it's definitely worth considering. I haven't had that happen to me in my practice. And I just want to uplift. Thank you, Mariah, for that comment. I didn't even know about Notebook LM. I'm sorry, Mariah, I failed you. But this is just another tool for us to use in our processes. Okay, so I'm going to pivot back to our slides just to make sure we get to the next one. Okay, so our next real use case is enhance, and this is about improving, critiquing, and advising. And so it can serve to help us as an assistant. I want you to think of generative AI as an assistant, and that can provide basic insights, analysis, creative tools, and some automation. And so I'm going to ask you all for your support. What I'm going to share next is my paper that I wrote in my first semester for University of Pacific. Okay, so this is when I was a true newbie, and actually my professor, Dr. Ann Zeman, is in the house, so now I'm double nervous, but she did give me a good grade. So we're going to see how this works out, right? So just because I have it available right now, I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, but you could, again, use whatever one you're comfortable with. And so one thing I'm going to do first is, we had an assignment. It was a final assignment, and I'm going to upload the rubric. I just pulled it out from Canvas and say, and also I'm going to pull the final assignment. Let's see if we can make it really complex with multiple documents. And this, we're going to just ask the question, using the attached rubric, provide me with feedback on my, I'm going to call it a draft. It wasn't a draft. It did get a grade on my draft paper. Give me specific feedback based on the areas the rubric calls out. And so note, the rubric is from class, that's for sure. But the paper is mine. It's my developed paper, okay? So one of the things we're going to do, let's see, is now it's providing me with feedback. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, because sometimes it's hard to bug people to read your 30-page paper. But now it's providing me with some strengths and some suggestions for improvement. And so I can choose to use those. I can choose to not use those. But as we go through, it's selecting the literature. It's giving me examples. Let's see what it says. The review includes a variety of peer-reviewed sources. Okay, we're off to a good start. It covers the breadth and depth of technical assistance research. All right, so ensure a balance between recent studies and older foundational works. The paper already does to extent, but could cite more 2020, more recent papers, okay? This would actually make sense because this paper was written in 2022. So keep that in mind. highlight the limitations of the reviewed literature more consistently. And so that's one of the areas, as a doctoral student, you want to critique things. Not my best, obviously not my best skill, but this can help me build that skill, help me become better at critiquing some of these things, integration and critique of sources. And so what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that as an assistant, it's providing you with information to help you in your practice, right? You could do the same with an Excel spreadsheet. You could do this with all kinds of things, and it could look at it and provide you with its calculated opinion. And you could choose to use that or not. In some cases, I did this recently, actually, at the recommendation of my professor, to take a look at one of my papers. And it was interesting what it caught, and then what some of the things that I didn't want to change. For example, like I took a specific tone to the way I presented the information, and I wanted to maintain that tone, but it caught it, right? Because it kind of goes against the trend. And so some of the things you can keep. And so these are just some of the ways you can use the technology. And so let me go ahead and pause here to see if anyone has any questions. Carrie, do we?
Dr. Zeman has asked a wonderful question about if students would say to AI, like, could you read the paper and generate feedback rather than a human, which I think you maybe a little bit addressed.
Okay, so would your students be okay if AI read the paper and generated feedback rather than a human? I mean, I would be okay with that. Another thing I have is Grammarly. And so I use Grammarly a lot, and that's AI reviewing my paper and providing recommendations and resources. So Dr. Zeman, your point is well taken. If I can find a human, I will definitely find a human, but it's hard to find human, right? And that's the thing about the time. And so going back to kind of what I shared at the beginning about wanting to help myself in ways that I can start this. Maybe this is your step one, taking a look at what I've done and then passing it off to your classmate to then take the next step of that human review and providing you perhaps a more emotional, connected approach based on how they know you. And so, yeah, maybe an iterative and having layers to your review would be a good approach to that. Thank you for sharing that. And I would definitely add that to the Padlet. And so I'm just going to leave it on this. Actually, can I go full screen? Let's see if it'll let me go full screen. Can everyone still see my screen okay? Wonderful. Let's try to go full screen here. And so as we're kind of landing the plane, I just want to remind us that for the third principle, we are responsible for the output we use. And so all of the images you've seen today were generated by our AI, with the exception of course, the ones of myself and my classmates. But note, it does have shortcomings, right? I circled it just in case, because sometimes I glance over it and missed it, but it's missing an eye, right? And that's intentional. I wanted to show you that it does make mistakes, and we are responsible for how we use it. I'm using it because it kind of teaches the lesson that we are always responsible for the output we use. So as I said with the Excel, I thought that was a great example. If the formula is wrong, I can't blame Excel. I have to go back and fix that. So just remember that we own the output that we use. It becomes our output. And so as we draw kind of to the end, I just want to circle back on our three principles, which is that number one, maintaining a human in the loop is the best approach to ensure that we can, number one, mitigate risk and take advantage of the possibilities and benefits of this technology. The second principle is human input is the first step. You have to provide it with the instruction, the prompt, or how you want it to process the data. You are the initiator. It can't do that for itself, right? And sure, we'll talk about automation probably in the next 5 to 10 years. But for the most part, for most of us in our environments right now, we are not at a place where the AI is working on its own or doing its own thing. And the third principle is just remembering that we are responsible for the output that we use. We are the ones that get to pick what we use as well. And so as we're kind of drawing to the close here, and I'll open it up for some questions towards the end, I have a closing challenge for you, and that is, of the 4 elements of DARE, which will you try today? How will you just try to experiment with this technology, and drop your responses in the chat? Will you try to use it to develop or create something that you've never tried before or never done before? Perhaps you'll use it to augment your capacity. Perhaps there's a task that you just get stuck with every single time. For me, that was the literature review. I just got stuck there. It was like a wall. I just couldn't get past it. And then I found a better way to start going through 500-page documents. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to do this a lot. And so now I consider myself a significant researcher. Um, and so that's part three, research. And I obviously glossed over kind of a lot of use cases because we're short on time, but I want to highlight some of our friends who are talking about how it can summarize your notes to this session, how it can experiment with some of these examples you provided. Thank you. You can augment and enhance your capacity. The key is to stop and think to decide to use AI and obviously find the right application. Notebook LM, explore that. Research to see if we can find anything. Thank you, Jennifer. Research and enhance. And so if you keep just DARE in mind and find those places where it might be able to assist you, I think you'll find that you'll be quite impressed by where it can take you. And so I want to circle back to where I was, right? Which is, what direction do you want to pick at this point? You could certainly close off to AI, but my recommendation would be to rethink that, to rethink about how can you experiment with this? How can you become acclimated? How can you become familiar with it? Because I think I see personally a future where this is some kind of skill that we're all going to have, right? It's kind of funny because all of us like probably use Google Docs, Google Excel, and we do all these things now, and PowerPoint and Sheets and that. And there was a time when that was not a common skill. And so understanding at least and being familiar with this, such that when you show up to a job, like in the case of IBM, they use it across their organization and they say, we have these tools and it's an expectation that we all use these. You can say, that's awesome. I am familiar with these tools. All I need to do is get trained on how I might use this in my own, in this organization, and then you can jump to the next phase. And today, I didn't even touch on how it can be applied in organizations. I really just wanted to focus on how people can use it in their practice, regardless of where they're at. Whether you're a student, whether you're a professional, whether you're a researcher, whether you're a teacher, there's many different ways, and you can experiment with that to find the one that's right for you and to continue to experiment with that. Like I said, one of my favorites is planning vacations on Google, Gemini, and finding out good places to go eat and good places to visit. And so we have about 7 minutes left. I'm so open to any questions that anyone might have. Feel free to unmute too, if you would like.
If you use the raise hand function, then I can see you and then I can ask you to unmute.
And also, if this is, as I said at the beginning, a community. Feel free to drop in how you are using generative AI in your practice in the Padlet that Carrie has been finding. I want to make that a resource for us together here that we can share and leverage. And also in that Changemakers resource folder, there's the slides and also a participant guide that provides some tips and resources. It's not extensive by any means, but I wanted to give you something to make sure as you leave here today, you are more empowered to do something and to experiment. So just circling back to see any other questions. In that participant guide is my email. So if you prefer to ask them in a separate venue, that's totally fine. And I see Jacob actually has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to just say thank you for doing this. I've been looking a lot at AI recently, et cetera, well, for a while, but I agree with a lot, although I think that some of the time frames you're saying, because of the exponential growth, which kind of is mind-blowing, literally, this is going to be impacting and changing probably with automation and things, I think sooner than what your hypothesis is at the moment. So that's the only thing I would want to comment on.
Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, and just note that is a guesstimate, personal guesstimate. But I agree. In some ways, I kind of agree. I think it depends on your organization, right? Like I work in government. Listen, Gen AI is not rocking the boat. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But if you work in private, there could be changes that happen pretty quickly, like automation, because it's an economic driver versus societal. So yeah, I would, Jacob, you might be probably right, is what I would say. Thank you.
There was another question in the chat earlier about plagiarism, but then there's also one here about it being true that GPT has been tapping into newer information versus was the case with older version updates, if you have any response on that or either of those.
So let me touch on the plagiarism part. I'm not sure. I think for me, just one of my basic principles is I'm going to come up with the content and I will ask it for advice on that. You obviously have to talk to your professors and your teachers about how they authorize your use of the technology. Some might say have a first thought, provide it to the technology and bring it back. But as far as I know, and having seen the journey, we need to be the ones creating the content and then asking for the assistance. And so that's just what I know at this point. And then Carrie, about the ChatGPT accessing recent technology, depending on the model you're using, they could be referencing up-to-date information. And so like I know ChatGPT does reference up-to-date information, but I would definitely recommend checking into each model and asking them on their resource pages, like Claude is one of my favorites, but it doesn't access recent information. And so that's something just to be aware of.
And then there was a question about courses that you might recommend for beginners who want to learn AI. And Alyssa also put something in about CPCE doing professional and continuing education. But if you have any other resources, please let us know.
Yeah, so I've just been going through LinkedIn. To honestly, done a lot of LinkedIn. I've done a lot of YouTube videos. I've attended a couple of conferences, just finding spaces where I can listen and be a fly on the wall. I did do a couple of trainings with the state, and so my focus really is on public sector and how we can leverage it to improve our services or to even be just more effective is really my question. And so I did include a link to the training I did on the public sector at the bottom of the participant guide. But there's actually tons. I mean, there's an explosion of like resources. And so also look for quality of professional learning, like look for the ones that probably have better views and are from reputable academic providers. Any other questions? I think I see one from Mo. When will my courses and trainings begin for the public? Mariah, once we get this doctorate done, maybe.
Yeah, no more projects. I'm sorry. I am curious to know, and if you shared this earlier, I apologize. I had to step out. You mentioned enjoying Claude, and you shared a couple of the other AI apps earlier. Do you ever like cross-reference your
100%.
outputs?
100%. Yep. I actually, when I first started using them, so I forgot to mention earlier on, I was actually a real skeptic. So when this all happened in November of 2022, I was like, be gone from me, devil, because I don't want no part of that. I did not understand it. I really did not. And I feel like I should have mentioned that to you all. I was a skeptic. Like I did not touch it. When I first started using it, I was like, it was hallucinating like crazy. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to work with this. I will not. And so one of the ways I first started trying to interrogate it was I would put them against each other. Like, what did you find? What did you find? Ha, you didn't find that. And I would do that on the same piece of information and start doing that. And so I think that's actually a good practice, and that's recommended by some of the people that I follow, is to use multiple. Is to use multiple for if you're asking for feedback on something. Actually, for this presentation, was it this presentation? I might have done that. I might have said, help me come up with a plan for this, help me come up with a plan for this, take a look at those and perhaps combine them. And actually what I've also done is when I was analyzing a data set just to test what could happen on interview data, I put it in both and then I compared the two. And then I compared it with my own notes. And so comparing, most of these applications are free to access, and you can start with a pretty good size amount of data. And so testing them against each other is really good practice, actually. Thank you for that question, Mo.
Yeah, thank you.
Last question before we wrap up. Do you have a podcast or book recommendation?
Podcast or book recommendation. I don't really have one specifically. I listen to Bloomberg Tech Check a lot, and listen to that just to get like a key of what's going on every day. I do have, Alyssa, if you want to email me, I do follow a bunch of AI newsletters that come through my inbox every day. That's how I know there's like millions of AI tools now. But they are very helpful in understanding how things are changing and like what is the actual difference. When you say Gemini 1.5 or Gemini 2.5, like what actually changed? And so that's very helpful. I can definitely share those with you, but I believe I meant to share some information, just hoping you all left informed, empowered, and interested in experimenting with AI. And then, Carrie, I believe these two, do you want me to skip straight to the QR code or leave this one up? Yeah, okay. Folks, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you with the QR code here. If you're interested, thank you so much for coming and being part of this session. I hope it's been helpful.